Either we are there or not, ITSP Magazine still gets the best stories. There are plenty of conferences and all sorts of events that spark our curiosity and allow us to start conversations with some of the world's brightest minds. In person or virtually, we sit down with them at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Together, we discover what the synergy of these three elements means for the future of humanity. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net.
EdgeScan offers continuous vulnerability intelligence as a service, accurately identifying vulnerabilities and exposures across the full stack. All threats are verified by cybersecurity experts, providing exploitable risk and remediation guidance, virtually false positive free. Learn more at edgescan.com.
Pantera, the leader in automation security validation, allows organizations to continuously test the integrity of all cybersecurity layers by emulating real-world attacks at scale to pinpoint the exploitable vulnerabilities and prioritize remediation towards business impact. Learn more at www.pantera.io.
Marco.
John.
The sirens are blaring. I think
something important must have happened. Maybe
that's right.
Maybe a breach, some ransomware. Why did they send those?
I think the siren was a new round of funding was just received. Somebody was celebrating.
Either that or the plaintiff call of companies looking for funding, having a hard time.
That's right. Where's all the money? Where's all the money? Well, people hear a voice here on this podcast. It isn't you and I, Marco. And I'll just kick it off by saying I'm thrilled to have Bob Ackerman on. Bob, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. It's great to see you again.
And this is part of our Chats on the Road to Hacker Summer Camp, BlackHat and DEF CON in Las Vegas 2022. And we get the opportunity and the pleasure of chatting with a lot of inspirational folks, speakers and panelists, and others who've been in this industry a long time doing a lot of cool things. And Bob fits that category, looking at investments and technologies and innovation and how we solve the problems that we face in this industry, and perhaps even why there's an industry at all. I'm sure Bob could probably talk about that as well. So this is connected to our coverage of the event, and Marco, you ready to get into it?
I am, and as you list this, I'm just going to repeat the joke that we made before we start recording. We do not have 4 hours, nor 10, so we'll try to summarize as much as we can and trust Bob that he can do that, and I have no doubts about it. So kind of like there's some hints of what's been going on, where we're at, and where we're going. I'm excited. I'm getting my popcorn. I'm going to listen to this.
That's right. Well, you have to hopefully chew your way through this one too, Marco. But Bob, before we get into it, for folks who don't know who you are and what you've been up to the last couple of days, maybe a few words about some of the things you've been involved with over the years.
Well, I joined the dark side, venture capital, about 25 years ago, and for the last 20 plus have been investing in cybersecurity. So, the founder of AllegisCyber, which was the first dedicated cyber venture firm, first dedicated cyber venture funds. Also the co-founder of DataTribe, the cybersecurity foundry based in Maryland that looks to transition cutting edge innovation out of the intelligence community and national security infrastructure into the commercial marketplace. So DataTribe really operates at that seed level where we team up with entrepreneurs to build companies out of their expertise, particularly leveraging offensive skill sets or deep data science skill sets that have been funded by government research. And Allegis is kind of classic early stage venture. So that's what keeps me busy.
I'd say that there's a lot of innovation in that space, and clearly we see something similar from the Israeli perspective, right? A lot of innovation and technology comes out of Israeli government and military efforts. I don't know if they have a similar setup where there's a private firm that helps see some of those through, but what do you see there, Bob?
Well, I think, look, the Israelis, if you talk about the two leading centers of cyber innovation from a geographic perspective, it's the U.S., probably 70% of the activity. Israel is probably 20%. 10% is rest of the world, and within the rest of the world, I'd say UK is probably the leading, third source of innovation. But yeah, I think, what you find is where you've got massive investment or significant investment in offensive capabilities, you develop a lot of skill. And virtually everything we deal with in the threat landscape today originated at some point in time in an offensive playbook. So where you have those offensive playbooks, you develop that muscle memory, and that muscle memory gets leveraged to build defensive responses. Certainly, that's the premise for DataTribe. We've now started 17 companies over the last 6 years. We start about 3 a year, and we harvest the expertise that's developed at places like the National Security Agency, where the U.S. government has been spending tens of billions of dollars a year for decades, developing very advanced cyber and related data science capabilities. And so, leveraging that offensive knowledge or that data science knowledge to build either a defensive countermeasure to those offensive playbooks, or to leverage the deep data science expertise in areas like homomorphic encryption. And so, we really, we at Allegis and DataTribe, but, other leading cyber-focused venture firms are really harvesting, that massive investment in innovation. And what it really does is it compresses a lot of the time to market, because you're not having to start with a clean piece of paper from scratch, but it also de-risks, some of the process of building companies. Homomorphic encryption is a great example. We started a company at DataTribe by the name of Inveil with Dr. Elsa-Ann Williams. Well, she led the homomorphic encryption efforts at the National Security Agency, where they actually got homomorphic encryption working in a way that scaled in production globally. That's a huge head start, in an area like homomorphic encryption, where industry researchers have been working for 20 years, but nobody got to the point where it was commercially viable. It was functional, but not commercially viable. Well, when you throw massive resources at a problem like that, and you make it a matter of national security, and you're prepared to invest over the long haul, the R&D investment generates a return that, frankly, nobody in the commercial marketplace is prepared to make that investment until there's a more obvious or more apparent market opportunity. So I think you see that in the U.S., you certainly see it in Israel. And even when you look to the UK, you see teams that came out of GCHQ that have developed those skills and are looking to apply those skills to dealing with some of the cyber challenges we have in the commercial market.
So as we have been doing some of these chats on the road to BlackHat and DEF CON, we talked to like Chris Crabb, to Steve Wiley, and we looked back as much as we could to 25 years of BlackHat, for example. And again, we don't have days or months to talk about this, but I'm curious, in a nutshell, maybe, are the parameters to judge a cybersecurity company now, either to found it or to invest in it, have changed due to the different dynamic between public and maybe in private sector? Or what's in a nutshell that difference that you can tell?
Yeah, look, there's been huge evolution. If I go back to 22 years ago when I started investing in cybersecurity, kind of the total market was maybe $5 billion. And you had Symantec and McAfee and frankly not too much else. Even at Allegis, when we transitioned our investment focus exclusively to cyber 10 years ago, people thought we were just paranoid. There wasn't that broad buy-in that cyber was a big significant problem that we needed to tackle. And I think what people failed to comprehend, and part of what our insight was, that as the global economy digitized, there would be digital vulnerabilities to that infrastructure. And that would be the cyber threat landscape. So our premise was that, cyber was not vertical, even though you could focus on it. Cyber, in fact, was broadly horizontal. And anywhere you had a microprocessor and data, you had a cyber exposure. And so I think there's been a growing realization as that global economy is digitized and more of the adversaries have looked for ways to compromise that infrastructure to extract value, however that is defined. There's been a growing awareness of this existential threat. And that realization is what really has kind of fueled the growth of our industry over time. I still think we're in the very early days, to tell you God's honest truth. I mean, this is good guys versus bad guys. The bad guys are just as smart as the good guys. They are equally and sometimes better motivated, and they're unrestrained. And so you have a very interesting dynamic of bad guys versus good guys, with the bad guys actually driving innovation. They identify vulnerabilities that they can exploit, and they're better at doing that than the defensive guys, who are really running about the business of deploying applications, deploying systems, trying to run the business. And, oh yeah, by the way, let's make it secure. Whereas the offensive guys, the bad guys, get up every day saying, where's the vulnerability? Where's the hole? Where's the gap? How do I exploit it? How do I monetize it? So you've got this very interesting dynamic in cyber where offense actually drives the innovation. And what that means on the defensive side is we are largely playing catch up and usually a little late to the party. We're reacting. And so you've talked about that 25-year time horizon. Yeah, growing awareness, a realization of the threats, massive investment, both on the part of the customer to secure their infrastructure, on the part of the innovators to provide the solutions to secure that infrastructure. But we're still largely in a reactive mode today. And I think when we talk a little bit about the future, my perspective is we have to get out of reactive and get to proactive. Part of that is secure by design. And part of that, frankly, is thinking like a bad guy, thinking like an attacker. One of the reasons, my playbook involves pulling teams. Let's pick one. Let's pick Dragos in the industrial control security space. Dragos began life at Data Tribe. Well, what did we do? We picked up 3 guys that were the core of the offensive team at the NSA in industrial control systems. And what was the task? Leverage your knowledge, leverage your expertise about the technology and the threat landscape and the vulnerabilities, and build defensive countermeasures. And if you want to build cutting edge defense, you start with the guys that created the threats. You start with the guys that were on the offensive side of the equation. And I think if we embrace that playbook, we're going to get a lot better at kind of closing the gap between offense and defense. Understanding typically, there's probably a 4 to 5 year time gap between when an offensive playbook is developed within, let's say, the intelligence community, and when that begins to manifest itself in the broader commercial market. But if you pull out a clean piece of paper and say, I want to build a cybersecurity company, what should I build? At that point in time, if you don't have the answer to the question, you're already too late to the party. And so in our world, when we're starting companies or working with teams, unless they've spent their entire career in cybersecurity, probably not going to be a fit for us. This market moves too fast. It's too dynamic. You can't really learn on the job. You've got to bring a baseline of knowledge and expertise with an understanding of where the vulnerabilities and gaps are if you're going to start a company and have a reasonable chance of building something that's commercially viable and successful.
So let's look back again, Bob, because clearly over the years, the infrastructure has changed, right? We had on-prem data centers and perimeters, and it was really servers and firewalls, and maybe your email gateways that you had to protect. Over time, we've introduced cloud and apps and APIs and all kinds of fun things that just open everything up. And I'm wondering your view of how things have evolved from a cyber perspective. I presume we played catch up against all those innovations as well. And where do we sit now with that? are we kind of are we set in a place where we can actually help new innovations be secure? Kind of to your point of secure by design, or are we always going to be in a catch-up mode?
I would like to say yes, but I think it's a challenge because the pressure to innovate and to digitize, on the of a business or to an enterprise, the difference between success and failure is the pace of that innovation. And so much of what we're doing, not in security, but in base case IT, is to drive that innovation as fast as we possibly can. And what happens is that security all too many times becomes a secondary consideration, if that. And so to get to the place, Sean, that you're talking about, we have to have a significant cultural shift to understand that while we're deploying advanced technology, security is at the table as part of that conversation.
Can I jump in, Bob? Because I don't know if this is a weird thought or not, but it seems like we're funding cybersecurity companies to come in and help shore up weaknesses in new technologies. I'm wondering, is there an opportunity to fund security within other things that are being funded? So we say, you're going to get funding for this new container technology, and here's a security venture or capitalist that is going to come and join us to ensure that you're investing in security in that.
Look, I think that's where we have to get. I think we're beginning to have an awakening. It's not driven by technology; it's driven by business. When the Securities and Exchange Commission, for example, starts to hold corporations accountable and put policy in place in terms of how they manage cyber risks, when this becomes a board level set of responsibilities, when you have the emergence of a chief risk officer, all of a sudden cybersecurity moves out of the exclusive technology domain into the business risk domain. And now all of a sudden, at board levels, you're having conversations about, let's talk about our cyber risk. Let's talk about our exposure, because that is potentially the existential threat to the business enterprise. And I think when you begin to have that conversation, and it pulls in the insurance industry, it pulls in the regulators, when you begin to have that conversation is when you begin to see a cultural shift in terms of, we're going to drive innovation, but with that innovation, security has to walk part and parcel with that, because innovation that exposes us to risk that we can't manage or mitigate doesn't help the business. But it is, when you have that board level conversation, in many cases you have boards of directors that don't understand cybersecurity, have very limited exposure to it, and so for me, if you want to see that real evolution, it's when the C-suite and the board of directors begin to understand the threat to the enterprise associated with cyber in the same way they look at other threats to the business. You get that cultural evolution where people say, we've got these really exciting new digital initiatives, but we need to have a security conversation in parallel with the functional discussion about this new digital initiative. And I think we're in the very, very, very early days of those conversations beginning to emerge. I wrote a piece for Forbes, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago, talking about the need for chief information security officers, in whatever flavor that is, to have a seat at that board table, and that means whether the CISO is within the organization participating with the board in these discussions, or it's retired CISOs being tutored to sit on a corporate board and bring that experience and expertise, that perspective into the discussion. And I think, frankly, that's where a lot of it's going to start. When this really becomes a priority and it becomes a mandate in how IT supports the business and how new functions and services are deployed, you've got to have that level of awareness to really drive that cultural change.
Yeah, I love you said cultural change a few times, because I was going to go there, because I'm going to make a joke here. Nobody should take me seriously, but when you hear this conversation, you're like, maybe I get a more secure investment investing with the bad guys. But as a joke, that's something that, sure, is the shortcut for the quick buck, for sure. But in the long run, you're going to be against the law, number one, and eventually you're going to get cut, right? And the fact is that we have to give time to our society to evolve and think. This industry, let's face it, it's really young in terms of evolution of our society.
Absolutely.
Well, I love what you just said and how everything needs to come together. And again, think the investment not for the quick buck now, but for the long run. And I love to hear from you. How are things moving with this? I mean, our company being developed in a more, I don't know, cultural environment that is fit, or we're still far away from it?
Again, as I said to Sean, I wish I could say yes, but we still have challenges, right? Until we get that cultural bit to flip, we're still going to think about cybersecurity as a technical domain, and there are technical aspects to it, but again, it fundamentally is about risk, right? And so I think we're getting smarter in some ways. But what I really want to see is I want to see this transition from reactive whack-a-mole, which is where we largely are today, to beginning to think prescriptive and preemptive. I have a view that long term, the most fundamental solutions and approaches to securing enterprises are actually to be data centric. If you think about the mouse, right? What's the mouse after? The cheese, right? And for hackers and attackers, most of the time they're after data. So in the cases of industrial control systems, they're after the systems themselves. And what that tells me is we need to think differently about the solution to the problem. Yeah, we can secure our perimeters. We can put intrusion detection in. What we've done to date is I want to see the adversary as far out as possible. I want to raise my perimeter as high as I possibly can to stop them from getting in. And if they get in, I want to find and kill them as fast as we possibly can. And that basically is the relentless mouse trying to find a path to the cheese. Well, we need to get to a place, and it's why I get excited about things like homomorphic encryption of data in use, where the adversary gets in and the data is useless. So I think things like homomorphic encryption are going to turn out to be very, very important. That's not the only one, but that data-centric approach to security, if the adversary is after the data, we need to spend more time securing the data as opposed to the infrastructure that accesses the data. I also think we're likely, if I sit down and reflect on some of my conversations with my friends in the offensive intelligence community, where we're going to see data-based or data-centric attacks, where data is going to be weaponized, and whether that is artificial intelligence and training data and manipulating models or corrupting data, to manipulate systems that depend upon that data, that's going to be the next big threat vector. And we have no defense against those attacks today. I chair something called the Global Cyber Innovation Summit, which is been described as sort of the Davos of cybersecurity. It's an invitational gathering of chief information security officers, policymakers, really thought leaders in intelligence community and cybersecurity. And Sean Tursky, 2 years ago, gave a presentation on the weaponization of artificial intelligence. And you see the real distinction between how offense and defense thinks about things. From a defensive perspective, we think of artificial intelligence as how do we close the skill gap? How do we automate processing all that identity to find the signal in the noise to improve our efficiency in responding to attacks? Sean flipped that and said, now imagine a weaponized attack or an AI-based attack. The Office of Personnel Management compromise doesn't take place in 9 months. It takes place in 9 hours. How do you respond to that? So, when I sit down and talk about a data-centric approach to cybersecurity, I think that's the future. And I think that's when you begin to get prescriptive about how do you think about cyber in terms of what the adversary is after and how do you secure that infrastructure. And I think that's going to be one of the big areas of innovation going forward. It doesn't mean that threat intelligence and perimeter and insider, it doesn't mean we ignore all that stuff, but it just means, as we secure that infrastructure, as we raise the bars, as we make it harder and harder for the adversary doesn't say, well, yeah, that was a good run, I'm done. No, the adversary leverages all of that offensive skill set and knowledge and just keeps innovating, coming up with clever, new creative approaches to get around all of the defensive, parameters that we've established. Now, from an investor's perspective, the good news is this innovation cycle goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And certainly for the rest of my career, we're going to be dealing with this. But we are in those early days where we're still trying to transition from whack-a-mole to beginning to think more preemptively and more prescriptively. And this is where you start talking about security by design and thinking about, as we develop systems, we develop them in a way that they're secure. We begin to think about securing the data and not just at an encryption level, but at a much more advanced, much more fundamental level. And so I think data science actually is going to grow and drive a lot of what we do in cybersecurity. What we're doing today is what we need to do. It's important, it's essential, but it's not going to be sufficient because the adversary is not going to stop. They're going to keep innovating.
They certainly are, Bob, and hopefully we continue to see positive innovation as well to help.
Well, we're going to see both, Sean.
I know, and that's and there'll be plenty of it at BlackHat and DEF CON both. Arsenal is a lot of fun tools, open source tools that represent this innovation. Clearly, a lot of research and presentations, and certainly the business hall has a lot of innovation as well. So, lots of things for folks to see.
You touch on open source as a great example, right? All of the economic benefits that accrue from open source at the expense of security, right? And so, I'm an old Unix guy, right? So, open source runs through my blood. And there are a lot of economic benefits that are associated with open source. There are a lot of security issues associated with open source. And this is where, our rush to innovate and leveraging open source, which is all positive, has a security side to it that we only wake up to and realize after the fact. Creates a new vector for innovation to, how do we rethink that in a way that security runs with that open source? So,
yep. Excellent point, Bob. And I wish we had another hour or 4 days and 5 minutes to chat with you. Perhaps we'll have you back on again because I have a gazillion questions, but we've run out of time for this particular Chats on the Road to Hacker Summer Camp. So, Bob, I want to thank you for your insight, for what you've seen over the last 25 years in investing and in this space and a view for the future. Sounds like a culture of secure by design is what we need to strive for. And hopefully we can get there. So thanks, Bob.
Always a pleasure.
I'm gonna go check on the cheese right now. Actually, you got me all worried about.
Well, that's why you keep the cheese in the Tupperware. So.
That's right. That's right.
All right, thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
All right,
so everybody listening, there'll be links in the show notes. I think we'll put a link to Bob's article in Forbes that he referenced, and anything else that Bob thinks would be useful for folks to understand about this space. And stay tuned for more as we continue our chats on the road to BlackHat and DEF CON.
Pantera, the leader in automation security validation, allows organizations to continuously test the integrity of all cybersecurity layers by emulating real-world attacks at scale to pinpoint the exploitable vulnerabilities and prioritize remediation towards business impact. Learn more at www.pantera.io.
EdgeScan offers continuous vulnerability intelligence as a service, accurately identifying vulnerabilities and exposures across the full stack. All threats are verified by cybersecurity experts, providing exploitable risk and remediation guidance, virtually false positive free. Learn more at edgescan.com.
CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our on-location conversation. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.